Mike. Good. Good afternoon. Excuse me. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me at the back? Mahina po. Okay. So I guess they'll just have to talk louder. Okay. Yeah, much better. So good afternoon, brethren. Happy first day of the days of Unleavened Bread. So, flash on the screens my topic for this afternoon. It's entitled Competing Against Ourselves. Now, in this world, we are accustomed to this phenomenon called competition. Okay? So, familiar po tayo sa term na competition, di ba? Competition happens in sports, in business, in schools, in society in general. In sports, two opposing individuals or teams battle it out for a defined time limit, trying to outscore. Kunwari, basketball, di ba? They outscore the other team, outpoint or outbox the opponent, sa case ng boxing. Okay? And the winner always emerges from these bouts, right? Laging merong nananalo. Competition also happens in the business world. Kung tingnan niyo yung mga naka-business suit, naka-high heels, di ba? Ready for a race, kahit naka-high heels. Okay? So, businesses always compete for that precious market share. Okay? And dominance. So, that's the way it is. Not that competition is bad. Okay? Hindi naman, porque sinabi may competition, masama, di ba? I learned as a college student taking up introductory economics as an elective subject that business competition can be good for the consumers and the economy in general. Okay? Pag may competition daw, pabor sa mga consumers, right? Now, the textbook I read says that the consumers benefit from it because they can choose from a wide variety of products or services. So, maraming businesses nag-o-offer ng ganitong product, merong choice yung consumer, tayo, okay? Now, companies try to offer better deals for their customers, so they think of innovative ways to attract and retain customers. O isip tayo ng ganitong gimmick para makuha natin yung business. Okay? So they think of better products. Okay? They try to make it easier for the business or for the customers to do business with them. Okay? And so on. So all of these things benefit the consumers. Okay. So there are better products, services offered. Okay. And most of all, monopolies are prevented. Okay. Monopolies are prevented. So I guess taking this reasoning, competition sounds and looks good, doesn't it? It sounds good. It looks good, right? But we cannot also deny the fact that competition can bring the worst out of individuals. Okay. We have heard and read of stories where certain sports personalities took performance-enhancing drugs just so they would win. Okay? At any cost, I must win. So I must enhance my performance. Okay? So meron silang performance-enhancing drugs. Okay? Now the same goes in the business world. Some would misrepresent their products or services or say outright lies about a competitor just to gain an edge in the market share. And that's the ugly side of competition. Now, the Bible also talks about a certain kind of competition that I think should be our primary focus in light of our observance of the days of unleavened bread. These days portray our effort to overcome sin, right? And put it out of our lives completely. Getting sin out of our lives completely. Now, when we think of competition, what always comes to mind is that it involves at least two parties. Okay? Kung pag sinabing competition, lagi naisip natin, at least merong dalawang parties involved, di ba? But have you ever thought that it could also involve just one individual? I'm talking about us, as individuals, tayo, okay? We can compete against ourselves. We can compete against ourselves. I want us to take note of that premise because I think that is what the Bible talks about in 1 Corinthians. Please turn with me to 1 Corinthians chapter 1, and we'll read from starting verse 24 until verse 27. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 24 to 27. Sabi ni Paul, "Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize?" So here Paul began to draw a familiar analogy of runners, competitors, if you will, running towards a prize, a goal. Okay? And then he had admonished us, as we were part of a race, to do it in such a way as to get the prize. Okay? We are running a race, okay? And we should run it to get that prize. Verse 25. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training, right? That's what everyone does, right? In preparation for a contest, about a race or a game. They prepare, they train, right? They do it to get a crown that will not last, okay? But we, referring to as true Christians, do it to get a crown that will last forever. So our goal, the end of that race, okay, the prize is not temporary. It is everlasting, okay? So at this point, I have to read that again. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. So at this point, Paul begins to differentiate between a physical race and the race we signed up for after conversion. After conversion, okay, we already signed up for this race. We are all in a race after repentance, baptism, and receipt of the Holy Spirit. Competitors in the familiar setting, we know, run for a prize that will not last, but we do it for a crown that will last forever. Okay? So continuing in verse 25, everyone who competes in the game, verse 26. Okay. Therefore, I do not run like a man running aimlessly. I do not fight like a man beating the air. No, I beat my body. Okay. Sabi ni Paul, and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. So next question, what are we competing against ourselves? Okay. Verse 26 of what we have read earlier gives us a clue. Okay. Verse 26, sabi doon, therefore I do not run like a man running aimlessly. I do not fight like a man beating the air. Okay. Paul says he beats his body and makes it his slave so as not to be disqualified for the prize. So what do you think would disqualify us for that prize? What do you think? Dear brethren, I submit to you, it is sin. Okay, that would disqualify us for the prize. It is sin. The very thing we want to purge out of our lives, as symbolized by our complete avoidance of leaven during this time. So during the days of unleavened bread, we do not eat anything, or we avoid anything that has leaven in it. Now in the next chapter, Paul goes on to remind us of the Israelite experience in the wilderness, but with added insight. He says they ate of the same spiritual food and drink, and that can be found in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 3 to 4, but we will not go there. So just take down note of those passages. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 3 to 4. But nevertheless, the Israelites, they failed to please God, okay, and were barred from entering the promised land. And Paul gave us warning in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 7 to 10. Sabi ni Paul, do not be idolaters, as some of them were. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink, and got up to indulge in pagan revelry. Okay. Verse 8, we should not commit sexual immorality, as some of them did. In one day, 23,000 of them died. Can you imagine that? In one single day, 23,000 of the Israelites died because of sexual immorality. We should not test the Lord, as some of them did, and were killed by snakes. And do not grumble, as some of them did, and were killed by the destroying angel. So what were enumerated here are sinful attitudes and sinful actions. Sinful attitudes, sinful actions, resulting to death. And then Paul goes on in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 11 to 12. So we read through verses 11 to 12. These things happened to them as what? Examples. And were written down as warnings for us. So all of these things were written for our benefit, as warnings, okay? As examples for us, on whom the fulfillment of the ages has come. So if you think you are standing firm, be careful that you don't fail. Okay? If we think we are okay, we should think again. Okay? Sabi ni Paul. So there is a warning against being what? Complacent. Okay? Kala natin okay na tayo. Yung pala hindi pa. Okay? Since we are competing against ourselves, sometimes we kid ourselves into saying we are okay. That we have progressed a lot in overcoming ourselves. Okay na ako. Na-overcome ko na itong aking weakness na ito. But have we really done that? Okay. But the truth of the matter is we are still far from the ideal. When we think of it, when we try to see ourselves objectively, okay, we are still far from the ideal. We fail in wrestling against ourselves. We fail in outboxing the old self. Okay. We fail in subduing ourselves. In other words, we fail to overcome ourselves. Okay. When does that happen? When we succumb to temptation. Okay. When we give in to our weaknesses. When we do not resist sin enough so as not to be overcome by it. When we compete with others in a manner that is destructive so as to result to lying or stealing or slandering other people. And the list can go on. Okay. In another letter to the Corinthians, Paul expressed concern. Okay, he was worried about the attitude of the Corinthians. Let's turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 20 to 21. For I am afraid that when I come, I may not find you as I want you to be, sabi ni Paul. Okay? So Paul was expecting something else. But he was worried that when he comes to visit them, he will not find them as he wants them to be. And you may not find me as you want me to be, sabi ni Paul. Okay? I fear that there may be quarreling, jealousy, outbursts of anger, factions, slander, gossip, arrogance, and disorder. I am afraid that when I come again, my God will humble me before you, and I will be grieved over many who have sinned earlier, and have not repented of the impurity, sexual sin, and debauchery in which they have indulged. So, did we catch some of the things Paul mentioned? Quarreling, jealousy, outbursts of anger, factions, slander, gossip, arrogance, disorder. I submit to you, these are all present when competition is around. Okay? Somebody spreads a lie about another kasi jealous siya. Okay? Nag-away sila. Quarreling. Nagkaroon ngayon ng faction. Okay? And then, ang nangyari, nagkagulo na. Disorder. Okay? Because of what? Competition. So these are all present when competition is around. It is noteworthy to realize that even in the Church of God, these things could happen. It is surprising, isn't it? And it did happen during the time of Paul. As proof, you can go to 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 10 to 12. But again, we will not go there. Let's take down those passages. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 10 to 12. So we should not kid ourselves, it could not happen to us. I'm not saying it is happening, okay? What I'm saying is, what we are warning about, what we are warning against is, it could happen if we are not careful. Okay? It could happen even if only one of us harbor a malicious thought against a brother or sister. It could happen even if only one of us whispers slanderous accusations against another. It could happen even if only one of us is jealous of the accomplishments of a brother or sister. Instead of being happy for that person, okay, nagiging jealous tayo. It could happen even if only one of us, okay, I already read that, it's jealous, okay? So factions within the congregation could result in disunity, disorder. And we don't want it to happen, right? And we all suffer because we were not able to overcome ourselves. Okay? That's the consequence. The whole church suffers. Okay? We let our weaknesses get the better of us. We did not compete well against ourselves individually. Okay? To put it another way. But this should not happen if we all overcome ourselves. If we all overcome ourselves, these things will not happen. Okay? So to help us in competing well against ourselves, we might as well heed the following passages in Colossians chapter 3, verses 12 to 15. Colossians chapter 3, verses 12 to 15. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Okay. We should remember that foundational promise. We are God's chosen people, selected by God Himself. We are holy and beloved of Him. We are set apart in God's eyes, hence we should act as one. Okay? There's that expectation. Okay? Whether we like it or not, there's that expectation that we should act becoming of God's people, holy and dearly loved. Verse 13, bear with each other, bear with each other and forgive whatever grievances you may have against one another. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since as members of one body you were called to take note of this, to peace, and be thankful. Now it is interesting to note the use of the word clothe in verse 12. Sabi doon sa verse 12, clothe yourselves with compassion, and so on. The King James Version translates it as put on. Okay? Something that you lalagay sa sarili. Put on. We are admonished to clothe or put on ourselves the character traits mentioned, okay, in the sense of these character traits sinking into us. That is, they become part of us. Okay? If we have compassion and kindness for other people, we have something that helps us overcome indifference to the welfare of other people. Okay? We overcome selfishness. If we have humility, we have something that will help us wrestle down our arrogance and boastfulness. Just like what we have done during the foot washing ceremony. We are enacting that humble act of Christ. Okay? Of washing, the feet of His disciples. That's humility. Okay? If we have gentleness and patience, we have something that will help us subdue unwarranted anger. Okay? If we are gentle, we are patient. Hindi tayo agad napipikon. Di ba? If we are patient with one another, okay, we eventually learn that bearing with one another is a natural consequence. We learn to let go of hurtful words that may have been said or actions that may have hurt us. If we can forgive from the bottom of our hearts, then we have something that will help us overcome contempt and hatred for another person, which fuels those divisive and fractious attitudes. If we cultivate love in our very hearts and make it part of our very attitudes, then we can look on everyone as someone who they can be. Everyone. Regardless of their faults, as potential sons and daughters of our fathers. Every single one of us, okay, can become a son or daughter of God. So we should bear that in mind. Okay? Then we can be at peace with everyone. we can get along with everyone. If we are able to do all of this, then we can win this competition against ourselves. We would emerge victorious. Okay. Now, we all know overcoming is a tedious and arduous process. Okay? Kanina meron nag-comment, tinanong ko ano yung message ko. Tapos sinabi ko, competing against ourselves. Sabi na, mahirap yan. And it is, mahirap. Okay? Mahirap talaga siya. But it can be done. Right? We need to be on our toes continually. Okay? Dapat lagi tayong handa. Lest we be overcome by our weaknesses. Always on guard. Okay? In our overcoming, we should always remember that other people have gone on before us, and they too overcame. We should remember that. Other people have done that overcoming themselves. These were ordinary men and women with extraordinary faith and persistence in running the race that God called them and us to run. Okay, as Hebrews chapter 12, and I'll be closing with these passages. Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 to 2. We read, "Therefore, since you are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses," who are these witnesses? These are the men and women of faith from the previous chapter. Hebrews 11, the so-called faith chapter. Okay? They are a great cloud of witnesses. "Let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God." So our focus should be on our Savior. Okay? So in this race, we do not need extra baggage. In this race, nothing should prevent us from crossing the finish line. We have no reason not to cross the finish line. We should, therefore, as encouraged, let go of anything that would do that. Let us overcome ourselves. In this race, we compete with no one but ourselves. Okay? We do not compete with others. We compete with ourselves. And I dare say the only time we look around is to see whether a brother or sister needs help in finishing the race. That's the only time we look around. Okay? To see if someone we know has stumbled or has grown weary and needs assistance. Okay? We go and help and run the race with them. Okay? Until they can go on their own. Okay? Sasamahan natin ang ating kapatid. Okay? If we need to slow down a bit for that brother or sister, by all means do that. Kung kailangan natin siyang, ang tawag yan? Alalayan. Okay? We have to. Okay? We have to do that. So in this race, we only need to look to our Lord Jesus Christ and God so that we should not get distracted. Okay? Let us fix our eyes on our Lord and Savior, just as Hebrews chapter 12 has admonished us. So we should all remember we are running a race with a glorious crown as the ultimate prize. Okay? We should always think of that ultimate prize. And that prize is for everyone who finishes the race. Everyone has a crown at the end of that finish line. Okay? So dear brethren, keep the faith, stick to the fight, overcome ourselves, and persevere in running this race. God the Father and His Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, are waiting at the finish line for each and every one of us, for all of us.